Our next writer is Amy Strauss Friedman, and she is the author of the chapbook, Gathered Bones Are Known to Wander. She is a regular contributor to the newspaper News City and a staff writer for Yellow Chair Review. Her poems have appeared or are forthcoming in Kentucky Review, Whale Road Review, say that fast 3 times, Red Paint Hill, and Lunch Ticket. Amy earned a master's in comparative literature from Northwestern University. She lives in Chicago and teaches English at Harper College and at Northwestern Center for Talent Development. You can find more information and her work at amystraussfriedman.com. She also has books for sale. I believe they're $12. Amy, please come out.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone at Waterline Writers for having me. You've all been so incredibly nice to me and supportive, and I really appreciate it. This chapbook, Gathered Bones Are Known to Wander, is really about disconnection. It's a collection of prose poetry, and it's in many ways about how we're disconnected from ourselves, from each other, from the world around us. And this is all just my observation, but I think that the more we try to connect, I think the less we succeed in doing so in so many ways. Connecting electronically, right, is supposed to sort of keep us together as a world, and yet it makes us very isolated and alone. Some of the conceptions of God or a higher power that are touted in the media or that we talk to each other about are just so strangely disconnected to me from what they're meant to be. One of the examples that comes to mind is last summer when there were, I think it was 17 Republicans running for the nomination for president. Almost all of them in their own ways said God had told them to run for president. And I thought, God is messing with at least 16 of you, just so you're clear. Now, I'm not suggesting that God does or does not talk to people. It seems to me that so many of the more deep connections we should make with each other become very trite and very stretched. So that's really what this is about. The first poem I'm going to read to you is actually the first one in the collection. It's called God Marks His Agenda's Draft. And I wonder, when God speaks to people, does he email? Is he a he? I don't know. But does he email? Is it something in the wind? I really don't mean to make light of this. I think it's interesting to figure out the ways in which we connect with powers we can't see. So this is God Marks His Agenda's Draft. Each evening, God emails me my next day's agenda, always marked draft. 3 or 4 revisions or addenda appear in my inbox before midnight. When I wake in the morning, I print out the final version and go about my day. On rare occasions, an update appears mid-morning, and when it does, it always includes something I was supposed to do earlier but hadn't, spelled out in bold block letters. At night, I check the news reports and find stories of car crashes and shootings, and I wonder if I'd had the agenda earlier, if any of these tragedies might have been avoided. I ask to see my neighbors' agendas, and they are always identical to mine. So I also feel that the more ways we have to understand each other, the less we really do understand each other, which is the impetus for this next poem, which is called Death by Google Translate. Since Saturday's blackout, you speak to me only in German. Our communication is relegated to hand gestures and Google Translate. Your words spit back as carcass and decay. Our apartment becomes a forest through which I search for the disembodied body you insist rests between us, every metallic creak now suspect and implicated in the murder. Bone fragments ascend in choir through the pipes, our cobalt wedding dishes in the kitchen sink, forget-me-nots amid the deep bloom of dissolution. I implore you to tell me who died, whose skeletal bits float like oyster crackers around my feet in the shower. Uns, you reply, means us. This next poem is called Miles from Home, and you'll see that it talks about billboards. I usually see people as walking billboards, that we're all sort of two-dimensional people with something to sell, that we're all shilling for some cause because we have to survive in the world. So when we get to know each other, we see the three-dimensional workings beneath those billboards, but I usually misjudge people when I first meet them, because whatever it is they're presenting is usually not who they are. It doesn't make it a bad thing. It means that I don't understand them, and they probably don't understand me. So every time I see a billboard, I don't think to myself, wow, what a flat two-dimensional object. I think, oh, there's another person. It's really what it looks like to me, and that's what this poem is from, Miles from Home. The picture of you on the billboard at the train station is vandalized daily. Every night it is replaced, though never with the same photo. Each morning I stand beside it for shelter from the wind and find you in a different mood, a different pose. One time you are playing tennis, smiling wryly, the name of the drug company you're shilling for obscured by your racket. In another shot you appear despondent, holding a cat in a close-up that faintly reveals the scar I gave you. That night I dreamed I was being chased by your mother and flailed about, my ring catching the side of your right cheek. Yesterday I climbed the platform to find you holding out a key, reaching for the door to a house that isn't ours. I pulled out a Sharpie and scrawled our address along the stone entrance, hoping you'll find your way back. So I grew up in a house where my mother always told me that not only is God watching me all the time, but she is watching me all the time. Like, she has cameras everywhere. She has eyes on the backs of other people's heads. I will feel guilty if I do something. So I started to think, as I was writing this next poem, like, how often am I really watched? And how much time does God really have? So this is called The Evils of Surveillance, and it's about how often I think each of us are watched and what might happen. My phone rang, but the caller ID came up blank, so I let it go to voicemail. God's secretary left me a message, reminding me that God watches me every Thursday between 3 and 4 p.m., and that last week he was dispirited by what he'd witnessed. I looked at my calendar to figure out where I'd been between 3 and 4 the Thursday prior, and was reminded that I'd attended a family baseball game in Lincoln Park. You were up to bat. You'd earned 2 strikes and were about to lose the game for our team. I pushed you aside, grabbed the bat, and hit the ball out of the park. A scout in the bleachers drafted me into a better league. 2 more I'll share with you. My wonderful husband of 20 years, as of last month, is here, and I think about the ways in which our relationship and all relationships change over time, and what they sort of mean as they're layered over the years, and that's really what this is about. And by the way, the people fighting in here are not us. This is called The Exhibit to Our Future. I return to find our home a museum and you selling tickets by the entrance. Dozens of people who look familiar are lined up along our front walk, checking their watches. Admission to our past costs visitors $15 and consists of a tour of nicked walls and broken doors where objects and fists were flung. Tickets to our present are set at $12, a circuit through silent rooms with perfectly made beds and tea vases holding tiny flowers in bloom. The exhibit to our future is not open to the public. This last one sort of follows in that same vein of disconnection, and it's called I Laid Out Your Psyche on the Coffee Table. I laid out your psyche on the coffee table, the pieces scattered about. Knowing how easily you veer into rages, I ignored your id and collected your superego, which had taken it upon himself to begin rearranging our living room and alphabetizing your record collection. I fused the superego with your ego, which had broken in half, not realizing that your id had started a fire in the kitchen while attempting to cook chocolate chip pancakes marinated in bourbon. Soon the house was on fire. There was no way out. Thank you.